Today marks officially 2 years for me being your pastor. I'm glad you clapped. That was going to be a really awkward pause. 2 years ago, one of my first impressions of this church was as I looked online and each church created kind of a profile of what they were looking for in a pastor and what they had to offer. What this church had put in all caps was, "We are willing to do whatever." And I guess that's what it took to choose me. And you guys brought me in and you said specifically, "We want to reach the lost and young families." About 5 months ago, the leadership team voted to blend in more contemporary music in our worship services. The desire being to reflect in our worship something that resonates with people of all ages. Over the past 5 months, we've tried a variety of things. We've shown videos, and people do specials. Dan and Karen have blended and taught a variety of new songs to our current team. About 2 weeks ago, I had a realization that what we have had so far in the past 5 months is about what is possible with our current volunteers. Last week, I proposed to the leadership team a choice. That we either say what we have had for the past 5 months is where we want to be, or I propose to them that we take the step of hiring a worship leader. The leadership team decided to go in that direction. Now, I want to make it clear, one, they were all very surprised. It was something that I hadn't talked with any of them beforehand, but I feel that it is the clear direction that the church needs to take. Now, just to be clear, we have asked Dan and Karen to remain on with us to lend their full support in whatever capabilities they have to whoever we bring in to lead. Now, it's interesting, in the church bylaws, there is no specific direction given for the hiring of anybody outside of the senior pastor and the janitor. And so what this looks like is something like this. The leadership has made the decision to move in this direction. Over the next few weeks, we'll have perhaps several people come in and talk with the leadership team, maybe lead worship, and then we will present someone to the church for ratification. Now, on the matter of pay, we don't know until we finalize things with whoever we're talking with what exactly that will mean. In any case, again, it will be a step of faith for the church. But I want you guys to know that my heart in all of this has been to glorify God in everything that we do. And I can't say enough how much I have appreciated the work that Dan and Karen have done. Y'all don't even know how many hours they have spent driving from their house to make it here. And yet I feel that God would have us to move in this direction. Now, I'm sure many of you have questions or thoughts. I would encourage you to approach myself or anybody on the leadership team with any questions or concerns or comments that you might have. So there's that, and now you'll all be thinking of that as I preach. Let's just pray for a moment as a church. God, we, in everything that we do, want you to have the lead. We pray all the time asking for your Spirit to provide direction. And sometimes that means stepping out into unfamiliar territory and uncharted waters. God, as you reveal things to people in leadership, as we do, as we feel is best, our desire is that all of us will be united together as a church body. I pray that in the weeks to come that you would prepare whoever it is that you would bring into the church. You prepare us as well. In Jesus' name, amen. So we're continuing on today in this series that than doing on the tongue and the words that we speak. I've always found it interesting that the inventor of dynamite won a Nobel Peace Prize. It might sound ironic, it might sound very contradictory. When I think of dynamite, I do not think of peace. It is an implement of destruction. It blows stuff up. You don't tickle people with it. And yet, at the invention of dynamite, it made possible so many things in construction. In fact, I think around here you can't dig any deeper than 2 inches without using this stuff. Dynamite was much safer to work with than the explosives they had used before that point, and so they gave him a Nobel Peace Prize for it. I mean, dynamite is just a thing. It can either be very good or very evil, depends on where you place it and when you set it off. Our words can be the same way. We're going to continue in James chapter 3. We covered the first part of this passage last week. We are continuing on, starting in verse 9. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. It is ironic that many people will sit in church and sing how great is our God, and then immediately after speak so poorly of people who are made in his image. Perhaps there's some truth to the saying, maybe you've heard, do you kiss your mother with that mouth? I guess perhaps it's derived with this. We might ask, do you praise God with that mouth? And I'm going to take just a moment here this morning to address the issue of cussing. You know, sometimes, and it's hard, because sometimes in the church world, I feel as though we focus too much on this particular issue, as though it's some kind of measuring stick of righteousness, the first thing we judge other people with. But it is addressed. In fact, for a long time, when I grew up, I thought that cussing was one of those things my parents just told me not to do for no real reason whatsoever, just like they told me not to stare directly into the sun. They just, parents say those things and you can do what you want. And yet the Bible is quite clear about the language that we use. Proverbs 4:24. Keep your mouth free of perversity. Keep corrupt talk far from your lips. Now, it is the universal tendency of mankind that when people learn a new language, do you know the first words everybody learns in a new language? They're curse words. It is universal. It's not surprising, perhaps, to us that every language ever studied in any culture at any time has dirty words as a part of it. And here's a statistic for you parents. Kids typically learn a 4-letter word before they learn the alphabet. I remember growing up in a very conservative church family, the first cuss word that I learned and going into the basement and joyfully whispering it back and forth with my brother, steadily growing louder and louder until my parents heard us from upstairs. And we had a talk. When I worked in the daycare in North Carolina, we got used to this line that parents would give us. They would come in and we would say, well, this is the word your child used. And they all would say the same thing. I have no idea where little Caitlin learned to say that word. And we're looking at him like, you just said it in the parking lot. So the age-old question is this. How do we define cussing? How do we define what perversity is or what qualifies as corrupt talk? Because it varies. Here in America, I can say something like, oh, I had a nosebleed, it was a bloody mess. But if you go to England, that word bloody is not an adjective, it is an incredibly offensive word. If I say to you today, oh golly, we say, well, that's a very, very mild expression of surprise. And yet at one point In American history, that word was incredibly offensive. It was formed in a contraction of God's body.
Yes.
People viewed it as a way of cursing God. On the ancient island of Crete, people, when they got really mad, might swear by saying, "By the goose!" I don't know. Actually, it was the king who had commanded them not to curse in other ways and encouraged them to swear by the goose. Now, Christians, of course, we come up with our own cuss words. You hear people say things like, "Oh, sugar snap." It's interesting, though, that people will make this point and say, "Oh, curse words are different everywhere," as though to say the words that we say don't really matter. And how can you define a list of words that are acceptable and the words that aren't okay? It feels very silly, and yet the Bible does not give us a list of words. It uses very general terms. Keep your mouth free of perversity. Keep corrupt talk far from your lips. And so here is what I would tell you today. If you view a word as offensive, or if it is viewed as offensive by the people you are around, don't say it. Is that simple enough? Can we all kind of go with that and agree that that is a sensible way of dealing with the issue? And so if you're traveling in England, use another word to describe things that are red and flowing. If I got in a time machine and went back in time in America, I wouldn't be singing, "Oh by gosh, by golly." I don't like Christmas songs anyways, but I wouldn't be singing that one. And just because I can cuss you out in Spanish, because I worked in a construction crew, without you knowing what I'm saying, doesn't make it okay. Now, here's the thing though, you can curse someone and be just as evil in your words without using any profanity at all. I'll use for you the example of the church father Martin Luther, one of the fathers of the Reformation. Here's some of the insults. In fact, there is a website that they created drawn from his writings that you click a button and it will give you a random insult from Martin Luther. Here are a few. "Your words are so foolishly and ignorantly composed that I cannot believe you understand them." He also told someone, "Perhaps you want me to die of unrelieved boredom while you keep on talking." He also told people, "You are like the mouse dropping in the pepper. You pious little prancer. You are a toad eater and a fawner. You loathsome, accursed, atrocious monster." Now, I just had the idea of throwing some of those on greeting cards for that unique flavor. And it's funny because to hear language like that coming from an otherwise godly person, James says it is equally strange that we would attempt to both glorify God and curse other people. Ephesians 5:4. "Nor should there be obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse joking, which are out of place, but rather thanksgiving." So in addition to the general idea of cursing here, it brings in the telling and receiving of dirty jokes. Sexual humor, the low-hanging fruit of comedy. I remember the transition. I went to a private Christian school until grade 5. And I went from being dropped off by my parents at this private Christian school to riding a school bus full of 5th graders to the public school, and it was quite, I'll say, an education. And it's interesting because dirty jokes are not a thing that 5th graders of my generation invented. In fact, if you dig up graffiti that has been buried in Pompeii for 1,500 years, you will find crude jokes, the kind of which I won't repeat here. It's basically the same all through human history. It's not a new thing. And yet sometimes people feel obligated to act and talk in a certain way. Like when I worked on a construction crew, everybody like on the crew kind of took it as like a given that we would be crew. And that's one of the reasons like I'm so thankful for comedians like Tim Hawkins, who is hilariously funny and yet does it all without cursing and without resorting to sexual-based humor. You don't have to be crude to be funny. Now, I understand, it can be awkward. You know, when you're around someone and they say something like that, or, you know, you're there on the water cooler and somebody, you know, tells one of those jokes. And it happens to me too, and so I've practiced what I'll show you now. This is my pastoral non-response phase. I practice this because every once in a while people will say stuff around me or to me, and I can't believe that they just said it, but I practice I'm not like laughing along with you. I'm not giving my blessing to the things that you're saying. But generally, people who would tell a pastor a dirty joke don't know Jesus. And I would rather have a conversation with you about the gospel than jump down your throat for a cuss word that you said. I mean, generally, that's one of the reasons that people feel uncomfortable around Christians, is they have this perception that if any of their flaws show for even a moment, that we are going to leap onto it and berate them for their fallenness. They are dead apart from Christ, I will remind you, church. Dead apart from Christ in their sins. You are not going to make a corpse stop stinking by telling it to freshen up. So, you getting on your coworker's case about their language isn't going to bring them from death to life, the gospel. So practice maybe with me your non-response space. I understand what you just said. I'm not going to call you out on it here. Neither am I agreeing. Let's go back to the verse though. Paul says not just that there should be an absence of certain things in the language and the words that we use, but he says those things are out of place, but there should be thanksgiving. James makes this clear later, again in chapter 3, verse 10. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? My brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. Now, if you were writing today, I would just add a few more to what he just said. And I would ask you, church, I'll ask and you answer. Do both decaf and regular come from the same pot, church? No. Can you, church, get sweet tea in Michigan? No. Can the Packers produce touchdowns without Aaron Rodgers? Apparently not. Oh, no, yeah. I'm asking for this because I said it. And of course, you know, the people that James is writing to would be saying the same thing. Of course, you don't get that. Fig trees don't bear olives. Saltwater springs don't have a freshwater option. And the point James is making is it is just as ridiculous for your mouth to bring both praise and cursing. We were made to be a blessing. This involves way more than just avoiding evilness. Proverbs 15:4. The soothing tongue is a tree of life, but a perverse tongue crushes the spirit. Which comes easier from your mouth? Words of criticism or words of encouragement? Do you make people feel soothed or crushed? Chopping a tree down is a whole lot easier than growing it and tending to it. Sometimes, though, and I understand it, I've been in situations where it's way more easier and a much longer list of criticisms that we can offer, and it just kind of springs from your mouth. Like 2 years ago, I was at this the camp meeting, and they had like this softball game every year. I don't know why. And they pitch it this way: it is the pastors versus the kids. Now, these are not pastors in my age category, and you can imagine how the score was going. And I felt like I had to say something to them, get them going. Like, come on, guys, I understand. The other team, they might be younger than us, and faster, and stronger, and better at softball. And I kind of forgot where I was going with that. Look, guys, those young guys, they might have abs of steel, but you guys have, like, titanium hips. Let's get going. This is perhaps why nobody's ever asked me to be in a cheerleading group. Can you imagine the cheerleaders going out on the field and they're cheering like, come on, run, fight, play hard, because the other team looks like they're a lot better than you guys. Try harder. That would not be helpful for the team, would it? There are some people who feel that they are truth tellers, but in reality, they are soul crushers. I'll say it again. There are some people who go through life saying, I am a truth teller, but they are crushing people. And how can you tell? Look at the results of your words. Is your tongue a tree of life to the people around you? You can ask them. Look at the consequences. Proverbs 12:18 says this: the words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. This one is personal to me. I'm not someone who loses their temper. I don't yell and cuss, but maybe you're like me, and that you can cut people with words spoken softly. I'll confess that I have hurt people tremendously in the past with piercing words. Other words, for the wise, bring healing. I was wrong. You were right. I'm sorry. The words, I forgive you. Ephesians 4:29. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. There's again that contrast, not just avoiding unwholesome talk, but building other people up. Now there's a difference though. There's a difference between building other people up and flattery. Have you ever been in a situation where you can tell that someone is being insincere and they're complimenting you? I remember sitting down one time for a meeting with a leader in the community who was they wanted something out of us. And they sat down and they spent like 5 minutes gushing about our church sign. As though that were like the most significant thing they had ever seen. And it was our church secretary, once a week, basically just picked a random sentence out of a church sign book and put it up on the sign. It was literally the least thought possible put into this thing, the most insignificant part of our church. But they were trying to butter us up. And it wasn't that they really, really liked our church sign. It was that they wanted something out of us. And they made that clear later in the conversation. Building people up is according to their need, not yours. Christine, at this age, has already learned to come to me and look up at me with those big, beautiful eyes and say, I love you, Daddy. I want some chocolate. According to their needs. Here is again, one of those Proverbs, just a good life application. Proverbs 27:14. If anyone loudly blesses their neighbor early in the morning, it will be taken as a curse. You have to be considerate of other people's needs. If you call your neighbor up at 5 o'clock in the morning to tell them, oh, I just think so highly of you, you're great, they're going to hang up on you. Be considerate of the other person's needs. And so if you want to build other people up, here's a few hints. One, be specific. Downstairs, I was teaching the youth, and we were talking about, encouraging one another. And so I had them do one of those activities where they all wrote their name on a sheet of paper, and other kids wrote good things about that kid on the paper. And I watched their response as they picked those sheets up. And overall, there wasn't much of a response to people who wrote very general things like, hey, you're cool. Okay, but if somebody said specifically, I noticed this specific thing about you, and I really appreciate that about you. Wow, they lit up. In fact, instantly, every one of them wanted to read out loud what other people had said to them. Do you know how hungry people are for this kind of thing? I see it all the time as that old guy on Instagram, and all these teenagers post this thing, they call it TBH. Meaning to be honest. And it's basically this game or this activity where they said, please, send me a message and I'll send you something specific that I appreciate about you. They're hungry for that kind of thing. Hey, I see old people do the same on Facebook, and they say, please tell me something you appreciate about me specifically. There's a deep desire to hear those things. Be specific according to the need, but hear me. Don't lie. That's not building people up. Don't lie to them. Husbands, I understand this might lead to issues for you. I've learned that if Sarah asks me, how do I look? It is best for me to actually look at her before I say, you look great. Husbands, have you done that? As if you. Because it loses its effect, right? If I don't even look up from my phone, if people don't feel you're being honest with them, I don't care what you're saying, it's not going to have the desired effect. And some people, they feel as though they need to lie to people in order to build them up. You don't need to do this. Look, you wouldn't go to Mike Tyson and say, hey man, you're just so eloquent and good with words. No! No, you go to him and you say hey, you're a really good fighter. Okay, you don't have to lie to him. You wouldn't go to Jerry Jones and say, hey, you are just such a good-looking guy. You're so handsome. No. No, you'd go to him and you'd say, hey, you're a really good businessman. You wouldn't go to me and say, Pastor Aaron, I think your artistic abilities should be on display in museums across the world, would you? No. You can just go to me and say that I'm handsome and eloquent, and we'll deal with that. Now, Sarah's downstairs with the kids right now, and I know, I'm just picturing her rolling her eyes there in the front. She knows, though, how to encourage me, especially when I'm feeling nervous. And we have this thing that we do. Like this past summer, I got to be finally the speaker for a full week at church camp. And I got there, and it's the first night. I'm doing my pacing thing, and she asked me, have you already rewritten the message entirely? I'm like, yes, I did that. And then she says, hey, just don't suck. She says, because, you see, you're here for 5 days, And if you bomb on the first night, man, it's going to be awkward for the whole week. Thanks! But here's the thing, and I was thinking about this. I guess what she's expressing to me, it is so ridiculous for her to think of me totally bombing it that she feels comfortable joking with me like that. And she knows that in that moment, that's what I need to hear and stop, being so, anxious about it. And she helps me feel relaxed and we can laugh about it. The better that you know someone, you know their needs, and it is such a valuable thing to speak to someone in a way that meets that need at the appropriate time. You can accomplish so much good instead of destruction. Proverbs 16:24. Gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. Now that doesn't mean that I can go down to OMC, find somebody in the ER, and say, hey, I love your new haircut, and boom, the broken leg will be healed. I wish it did. But your words can reach and bring healing to wounds that doctors cannot heal. In the same way that gossip and slander leaves a painful mark that is remembered years after the fact, gracious words can fill you with a warmth that endures. There's this photo series online, and it's just 2 pictures of people's faces. 2 pictures side by side, and the photographer said, my deal was I took a picture of a person and then I told them that they were beautiful. You see the difference that it makes. The sweetest thing that Sarah's ever said to me, and I will remember this as long as I live. She was watching a video series online, and a sermon series. And it was by Pastor David Platt. Now, the name doesn't ring a bell for you. David Platt is like one of those rising superstars in the church world. Everybody buys his books and, would beg to have him as a speaker at their event. Sarah, though, didn't recognize his name. And so she's watching his sermon, and she tells me afterwards, I was listening to this thing by David Platt, and he was preaching on this, and she said, I liked it. It was all right, but I felt like you could have preached it better. And my head just went like 5 sizes bigger. But man, it meant so much to me. And more than that, when I first, they said, look, I was a youth pastor at the time, they said, you gotta understand, if he ever decides to become a senior pastor, you're going to have to listen to him preach the rest of your life. And she was okay with it. She wasn't like, oh, I'm going to have to sit down and think about it. There wasn't an awkward silence. She was like, yeah, I'm good with that. And man, that just makes me feel like $1 million. I can remember the exact words now some 8-9 years ago. The pastor under whom I dedicated my life to Christ was praying with me. And he said, God, I believe that this young man will go on to do far more than I have ever accomplished. Someone speaks words like that into your life. You can probably sit here today and think back, probably even a grade school teacher, Miss Kathy, who looked at you one day and said, I see something in you. The ministry of Miss Maisie and the cards that she writes. Do you know Miss Maisie? Christine you sent her a birthday card. A handwritten note inside. She has it still in the original envelope. And she will come up to me and ask me to read to her the words again because she wants to hear it. A well-chosen word of encouragement can have an impact on someone that will last a lifetime. Colossians 4:6. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt so that you may know how to answer everyone. Now, the expression full of grace and seasoned with salt, in a general sense, yes, of course, we are saying nice things. That reference to being seasoned with salt, Jesus said that we are the salt of the earth. And so, of all the words that are positive and build people up that we can speak specifically as followers of Jesus, will you say his name? Will you tell other people about him? Will you speak the words of life? Scripture. You see, this is why I love airplanes. Whenever I get to go on an airplane, as a pastor, I've learned to appreciate a captive audience. And that person who's sitting next to me for the next 3 hours has no choice but to sit and listen to whatever I have to say. I mean, what are they going to do? Escape out the hatch? Bust the door open? And so I am intentional as I go into it saying, I'm going to have a conversation with this person, and I am going to look for an opportunity to share the gospel or some truth from God's word. And I've had some incredible long conversations with people about their faith in the seats of airplanes. Now, even if you're not flying during this time of year, you are spending a lot of time with family. We're coming out of Thanksgiving, you might be done with the whole thing, but you're spending a lot of time with family. Make your words count. I can tell in myself, I notice the difference when I walk through the day anticipating a chance to share the gospel. And other times I just forget about it. There are times when I'm looking for that opening and my ears prick up. And then there are times where I give no thought to it. And I feel I've lost opportunities. Now I understand this can be hard because there is such a thing as what my old boss, who was an atheist, called the pushy Christians. You can be fake about it. Maybe we've all been around people who are so very vocal about their spirituality and have lives that fail to match it. And seeing that fakeness in other people can make us timid to speak for ourselves. I've just been very aware of this in my own family. I understand in our extended family, there is, I don't even know if they know what to think of me and the things that I do. And I'm a little bit of a fanatic, I think, in their eyes. And I worry about that sometimes. And then one day my brother was just like, Aaron, you can talk to me about God. I've been holding back too much because I didn't want to be like that guy. And I was missing out. But I want you to be ready to answer people. There is going to come a time of accounting in our lives. And we are going to stand before the maker of heaven and earth, and we are going to answer for the lives that we have lived and the words that we have spoken. My prayer for you is that in that moment of reckoning, it would be characterized for you with joy. Because I believe that we're going to get a chance to see the impact that our words have had on other people. So my prayer for you is that you would choose to be a soothing tree, bringing healing, full of grace and seasoned with salt. Let's pray. God, I pray that you would bring to awareness in our minds something that we often give as little thought to as our eyes blinking or the breaths that we take. Yet the words that we form with the breath that you gave us have such impact on the people who are around us. God, I pray that our mouths would not be found to contain cursing and bitterness and evil instead of your praise and the building up of the people around us. It may be that we have some repenting to do, but Lord, will you be the one who does the work in our lives? In Jesus' name, amen.